The interstate system is extremely extensive, with so many different types and lengths of routes all over the country. I find it so interesting that it can apply to cross-country highways traveling over 2,000 miles coast to coast, and also apply to small routes running under a mile. That's absolutely part of the beauty of the system, since it's been designed in a way to not only connect cities and states across the country, but also in a more local way to get people to specific spots within a city or right off of another major highway. This is where the idea of spur routes came from. You can't just build these highways from city to city. You also need to focus on the needs of individual cities and their traffic. This has obviously created some very small interstate routes, so I thought it would be fun to look at every US state's shortest route, going from the longest shortest route all the way to the shortest in the country. Before we get into that though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We make geography content like this every week. So if you enjoy the videos and want to support me, simply subscribing is the best way to do it. Thank you. So quickly before we get into the list, let's go over a couple ground rules. First of all, there are a few states that don't have any interstate spur routes. So for those, we'll just go for the shortest length of an interstate within that state, since there won't be any that start and end within the state. Apart from those that are in a different situation, I'll just go by the shortest interstate that passes through or is entirely within the state. For example, the shortest interstate in Nebraska is not I-76, even though it's within the state for only 3 miles. But if I-76 were to be a total length of 4 miles between Colorado and Nebraska, then I would count it. It doesn't have to be entirely within one state. Now, with that out of the way, we can go to the bottom states on our list, starting with 50th place, which is I-10 in New Mexico. This is one of our states with no spur routes, and so the 164-mile stretch of I-10 within the state ends up taking the cake. Moving to 49th, we have A3 in Alaska, part of the confusing Alaskan interstate system. This highway is signed for 148 miles from Anchorage to Soldotna. Arizona is the final state without a spur route, so I-15 in the northwest corner of the state finds its way onto the list, at a length of 29.39 miles. Just beating it out is another western state, with I-215 in Utah, a highway passing through the Salt Lake City metro for 28.94 miles. Moving to the eastern US, we have 2 tiny states that end up low on this list because they only have a few spur routes within their state, with I-295 in Rhode Island at 26.58 miles and I-495 in Delaware at 11.47 miles. The next 4 are relatively unimportant urban connectors or bypasses, with I-215 in Nevada at 11.1 miles, I-470 in West Virginia at 10.6 miles, I-630 in Arkansas at 7.4 miles, and I-270 in Colorado at 7.1 miles. Moving to 40th place though, we have I-676 for New Jersey, which is a 6.9 mile route that passes through Camden and into Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is what I mean about multiple states, and it still counts, although it's not the shortest in Pennsylvania. I-516 in Georgia through the Savannah Metro comes in next at 6.5 miles, and after that is I-291 in northern Hartford, Connecticut at 6.4 miles. And then comes I-471 in Kentucky, which is a state that was low on the longest interstate list as well. This time the highway stretches 5.75 miles, so I guess the state can't do anything right. Moving to I-235 in Oklahoma City, this is our final highway over 5 miles long, at 5.36. Moving under 5 though, we have I-865 in Indiana, a small connector route that almost serves as a glorified ramp between 2 other interstates, at 4.72 miles. Moving to the northeast for a couple, we have I-393 in Concord, New Hampshire, a highway that moves east from the downtown for 4.59 miles before just ending, with no real purpose to any of it. That one's confusing. Next is Massachusetts though, with I-391 in Springfield, which stretches 4.49 miles into downtown Holyoke. I-277 in North Carolina barely beats out Massachusetts, being part of an urban loop around Charlotte, stretching 4.41 miles. And in 21st is a very similar urban loop with I-405 in Oregon, which also helps connect the downtown to a freeway at 4.2 miles. Getting to 30th place, we have a funny one with I-110 in Mississippi, which is 4.1 miles long, connecting to downtown Biloxi before almost just continuing into the ocean with the iconic loop, one of my favorite landmarks in America. Next we move to Hawaii with H201, the shortest of the state's 4 highways. Moving under 4 miles, we have I-184 in Idaho at 3.62 miles in downtown Boise. And next we move to our first repeat highway, which is I-129, which is the shortest in both Nebraska and Iowa, accounting for 26th and 27th place. This is where we reach our halfway point and get into the above average interstates in this category. Starting with I-190 in Illinois, which connects I-90 to O'Hare at a length of 3.07 miles. Next we have I-510 in Louisiana, one of the interstates in the country that connects to pretty much nothing in the east part of town. And though there's a story about it, I can't cover it all in this video, so go watch my full video on this part of New Orleans. Moving on, we have I-381 in Virginia, a funny little interstate with no exits or anything, just connecting into Bristol from the main Interstate 81. Our next one is another double with I-535, which is the shortest in both Minnesota and Wisconsin, connecting Duluth across the St. Louis Bay to Superior at a length of 2.78 miles. Next we have I-490 through Ohio, which is 2.43 miles long through Cleveland. We have our final double coming right after as our tie for 18th place, with I-670 in Missouri and Kansas, connecting downtown Kansas City across the river for 2.3 miles. Now technically both of these states are also tied for 17th place with Alabama, since I-359 in Tuscaloosa is 2.3 miles as well. But I think Alabama does end up being a few feet longer. I-585 in South Carolina is a fun one, having no large interchanges on either side of the route, and not connecting up to its mother interstate I-85. It also doesn't reach downtown Spartanburg either, so it overall feels like a really sucky highway, at 2.25 miles long. Moving into our top 15, we have I-238 in California, a fun little interstate because there is in fact no I-38. So this spur route name has nothing to do with any other interstates, instead being named after the state highway that's also signed there. I-238 is 2.13 miles long. After California comes I-395 in Maryland, which connects into downtown Baltimore near the stadiums, at 1.98 miles long. This is our first interstate that is under 2 miles. Next up is our first unsigned highway, being I-124 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is where things get confusing, because some consider unsigned interstates to be real, and others to not be real. The whole thing is really not helpful for videos like this, so I'll just be including unsigned routes, meaning this is 1.97 miles long. Moving on, we have I-190 in South Dakota, an interstate that I think has sidewalks for a short period at the very start, which puts it on my list of stupid interstate highways. It places high on this list though, at 1.72 miles. 11th place is Pennsylvania's I-579, a simple downtown highway in Pittsburgh that helps form the loop around the central business district, at 1.57 miles long. Moving into our top 10, I won't be going incredibly in-depth, since a lot of these highways are covered in my shortest interstates video. But in 10th place, we have I-195 in Maine, which connects to the small beach town of Old Orchard Beach, which sees lots of traffic in the summers and needs a highway, I guess, at 1.55 miles. In 9th place is I-705 in Washington, a controversial freeway to downtown Tacoma, which in turn cuts off the city from its waterfront at a length of 1.5 miles. In 8th place, we have one of the worst interstates in the country, with I-189 in Vermont. It was meant to be built more into the downtown of Burlington and be longer, but opposition led to it stretching just 1.49 miles into the south side of town. In 7th place, we have I-395 in St. Petersburg, Florida, one of the two small routes that connect into the downtown. This squiggly route is the shorter of the two at 1.29 miles. Next up is I-194 in North Dakota. Now this one, I feel like I go against my own word, since there's an unsigned portion that goes on farther. But my logic is that this part is signed, so I count it as a different route than the unsigned part. With that being said, it ends at 1.2 miles. Moving to the worst of the worst, we have I-180 in Wyoming, which has multiple surface intersections and works nothing like a traditional interstate. But it got the designation just because it wanted government funding. It ends at 1.09 miles, putting it in 5th place. In 4th, we have I-375 in downtown Detroit, Michigan, which is just 1.06 miles. This highway is in danger of being demolished, since it's a controversial route within the city. So my list could potentially change at some point soon if this ends up going through. Into our top 3, we have I-110 in El Paso, Texas, which is used to connect I-10 to the Mexican border. getting government funding for that reason. It moves us under 1 mile at just 0.86 miles long. That's the shortest signed interstate in the country, with the top 2 being unsigned, starting with I-315 in Montana, which you can barely call an interstate, as it's just the first small section of Business 15 in the city of Great Falls. Because of that, it technically means it stretches just 0.83 miles, taking the number 2 spot. Finally, in first place, we have I-878 in New York. This is just one direction of traffic near the JFK airport that somehow found its way into the interstate system due to funding. It's unsigned, and you can pass it without noticing anything different at all, but it ends up taking the first spot on our list at 0.7 miles. That's where the list ends, though. I think it's fun to note that once you get into the top 10 to 15 highways on this list, every single one ends up having a fun little story, because no normal interstate would be that short. I've looked pretty extensively into every one of these, and I encourage you to do so as well, because the history of infrastructure in this country is fascinating. Thanks for watching.